Welcome to the Fantasy Baseball Beat, part of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Torres. I'll be your host today. We've got a great show for you, at least I think. Hopefully, you agree. Unfortunately, Mike will not be joining us today. And no, it's not because he drafted Sean Burke in TGFBI, though I do think that is a fireable offense. But actually, it's because he's flying out here to New York to participate in Tout Wars. So good luck to him. But Dave and I have a great guest with us here tonight. His second time on the show. We have Thomas Nestico here with us. You know him as TJ Stats. He's absolutely one of the best baseball follows on X. He also has a fantastic Patreon that has so many awesome tools that we'll talk more about. Also has a great Substack that you can subscribe to. So he's got it all going on. But before we bring him in, let's check in with my co-host, Dave Funnel. Dave, how's it going, man?
Life is good. I'm a teacher up here, and it's March break, so I've had a week of not being at school, so it's been good.
Awesome. Well, you can dig into. We're gonna be talking a lot of spring training stuff today, so I'm sure you've been glued to all the happenings of the past week here while you've been off, and as always, on top of the injury stuff. So, yeah, but let's get right into it. Let's bring in Thomas. Again, Thomas is on X at TJ Stats. I'm still getting used to I've transitioned. All right. I was saying Twitter. I wasn't going to let it go, but I've transitioned to X. I'm giving up that battle. So, but TJ Stats on X. And again, he's got an awesome Patreon Substack that you should be subscribing to. Thomas, thank you so much for being back on the show with us. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm glad to be back for the second time. I joined you guys about a year ago. From today, actually, yeah.
Yep. And I mean, I feel like your following continues to grow and you continue to do more and more great stuff with your social media and your Patreon, your Substack. I'll tell you, the other night, I I didn't want to go to bed because I found your spring training leaderboard. Now I'll tell you, the earlier that day I was on StatCast and I'm like trying because I had seen people like talking about like this player's average exit velocity in spring training or their max exit velocity. I'm like, where are people getting that? So I'm on StatCast and it's like a clunky, like the search there is just like not very good, not very user friendly. So then I was preparing for the show and I saw that you had a StatCast leaderboard that is incredible. I mean, it is so easy to use, like stuff that I've been wanting for spring training, like to analyze spring training in years past. It's all there. And to boot, it's free. So that's my first plug for your work. I mean, I think that is an absolute. We'll talk more about spring training and the utility of it and all that, but like, I mean, just to be able to get all of that information in one spot is amazing. So thank you for that. You caused me to lose sleep the other night, just so you know, but but I enjoyed myself. So I guess we could start if you just want to introduce some of your the work that you have out there and just tell our listeners a little bit about it.
Yeah, for sure. I still call it Twitter. I'm going to continue calling Twitter, but that's where
All
you'll
right, you're
find
holding
me.
strong. I like it.
That's where you'll find me mostly. TJ Stats on Twitter. I'm also on Blue Sky if you guys use that as well. So what I do, I try and make baseball analytics more fun and also more kind of visually appealing and accessible for other people. So again, I mentioned my Patreon earlier. That's where I grant access to all the apps I make. Essentially, all the graphics I share on Twitter and my Substack are all created with these web apps that you can access to by subscribing to my Patreon. So again, I think I'm mostly known for my pitching summaries, my TJ Stuff Plus model. We're going to talk about that a bit later. But again, I just love baseball and I like making it. I like helping other people understand it as well. I think analytics is definitely probably the largest and the most important major sport with respect to baseball. and it's just only going to continue growing. So making fans more aware of what these metrics mean, even if they're not familiar with them at all. Like maybe they don't know what Baseball Savant is or what Statcast is. But
Mhm.
again, giving them that kind of intro to it is something that I think is really important, and kind of also sparks the minds of other people to kind of create their own metrics or models and their own analysis. So again, I'm just a huge baseball fan. I self-proclaimed baseball nerd, and I just like creating stuff that I think is cool, and hopefully other people as well.
Well, all us fellow baseball nerds absolutely love what you're doing. I'm honestly, I get a little worried that one day I'm going to see a tweet that the fill in the blank major league team that you're going to work for them. But we'll enjoy you while we have you. Yeah. You're not going to be coming on my podcast if you're working for whoever. So, but no, man, seriously, you do an awesome job. So I was talking before about looking at the spring training leaderboard, and again, this is kind of like new stuff. We really haven't had this level of access to spring training data, and I think your Patreon does a great job of kind of consolidating all of that info. But I want to start with kind of a broader question, because I think this is something that when I'm looking at this stuff, I'm like always asking myself, like, how much should I weigh this? Right. Like, obviously, we're dealing with super small samples. Um, and sometimes we're coming to very outside conclusions based on that. I know in the past, like, this is why I struggle with it. Sometimes, like in recent years, like I find a little nugget, like, a pitcher's velocity's changed, or like his K to walk ratio is off the charts in spring, and like I've seen that carry over, right? And I've been able to identify some breakouts with that. But on the flip side, I've also, you know, kind of bought in a little too much on maybe a couple starts or 50 plate appearances, and maybe boosted a player's value up way more than it should have been based on that small sample. So the question I want to start with is, and I'm going to direct this to you, Thomas, how much do you think spring training matters, and what do you think us as fantasy players should be most focused on when we're evaluating a player's spring training performance?
Yeah, from the box score, I would say most of the time it doesn't really matter the results. What I like to look at is the process.
Mm,
Specifically for batters, what you want to see is, are they getting playing time? That is definitely one thing you want to note. Because then there are a lot of players battling for positions right now, battling for that, getting on that 26-man roster, especially if they are on the 40-man roster. Again, if you're saying in fantasy baseball or whatnot, you want to find these very deep, deep targets. If they're getting kind of a runway to play in spring training, it's probably a good chance that they're also going to be on the major league roster and potentially being contributors to that team. And what else I like to look at is the Statcast metric. So again, my Statcast leaderboard, I like to pursue them. I actually added a tab for it because I found it was so important. If there is any increases in their max exit velocities, because again, when we're looking at things like strikeout rate, walk rate, those take about 100, at least 100 plate appearances to stabilize, and you're not going to get to that level, that volume in spring training. But you will get a good reading if a player's hitting the hardest they've ever hit before. That is something to take note of. If you
mhm,
have like Trezor Nales, I think I butchered his name there, of the Padres. We have some bat speed data. He's swinging the bat harder this year, and he's also hitting the ball harder than he's ever had. So that's
mhm,
pretty important to note. And he's playing a lot. He's probably going to be the Padres' opening day left fielder. Might be more in a platoon role, but he is going to get that playing time, which is important to note. So again, max exit velocities for batters, that can be no matter what. That can be a sample size of one. As long as it's better than what they did last year, that's what's important, or even just in their career, that's what's important. And as
mhm,
we start getting more and more plate appearances, what I like to look at is whiff rates and chase rates, because again, it's not just one plate appearance we're looking at. We're looking at how many swings this batter has taken, how many pitches they've seen outside the zone and swung at. So again, I like to look at more so those batted ball metrics, mostly pertaining to their exit velocities. They're just hitting the ball a bit harder, and also if they're not chasing, if they're swinging at pitches in the zone more, maybe they change their stance a bit or just change their approach. So again, when I'm looking at spring training, the box scores, their average, their on base percentage, I don't think it's too important, but I see a player making a lot more contact. A good example is Spencer Torkelson. He's making a lot more contact this spring, and that could be important to note, especially since he struggled since kind of making his MLB debut. And then when I'm looking at pitchers, again, I would just completely ignore what you see at the box score. ERA, that doesn't matter. Most pitchers they get like 10 innings. If they get blown up in one inning, their ERA is already out the window. It doesn't matter. But you want to look at strikeout rate. After a bit, strikeout rate and walk rate have some signal to them, but again, it's not a lot of not a lot. I would say, especially if we have that larger sample from say a season prior or just their career. What I like to look at is more of if they've reintroduced a new pitch or added a new pitch to the mix or changed it up completely. We're going to cover some pitchers later that gained a pretty significant bump in velocity. Maybe they've changed like their arm slot or something like that, or just changed the shape of a pitch or added a new one. So again, there's for pitchers, I find we can get a lot of information from just one start, and that's very important. For batters, it'll take a bit of time to go more, and that's why I don't really weigh batters' kind of results in spring training too highly. Again, hitting the ball as hard as they've ever had before is important. It's just if they hit like 3 home runs, does that really matter too much? Like maybe they did it off some like low A pitcher that is seeing a guy above double A for the first time in his career. So again, batters, I think there's just less information, which again, that's how baseball works. They're not playing every day as well. With the pitchers, we can get a lot of information, especially with regards to their pitch mix and also if they've added new pitches. So I find spring, it's also just a fun time to watch. And again, tracking the lineups is also pretty, can tell you a lot, at least, how a team is looking to operate once we get to the season, especially once they start trimming down the rosters.
Right. And you also have a tool that does track spring training lineups. Again, very user friendly, also free. So just want to plug that as well. Real quickly, I thought about asking you this, but since you brought up the lineup stuff, is there anything that jumps to mind in terms of maybe a trend or an individual player that in terms of their spring training lineup that kind of sticks out to you?
One that was really interesting to me was Tyler Soderstrom. Like I knew he was going to be the Athletics opening day first baseman, but he played a handful of games at catcher, or at least started a handful of games at catcher, which is really interesting. He's never really done that when he's playing in the majors. They have Shea Langeliers there. So I do expect Shea to get most of the run there, but if Soderstrom plays enough games as a catcher, he will get, I would assume, eligibility in whatever platform you're playing with. And that just gives him another ceiling to his value. I label him as a breakout candidate for this season, just due to his raw power and his okay contact rates, but having that extra flexibility in your roster, in your fantasy roster, is very important too. Another one that I found is Gerard Encarnacion. He's playing a fair bit as well, and the Giants don't really have a set first baseman. I think Wilmer Flores is that guy right now, and I don't know. He's kind of boring. Maybe they like him there, but I think Encarnacion has that power to just hit 30 home runs if he's able to make enough contact and also not strike, like not just chase at everything. But yeah, it was just looking through these lineups, seeing kind of where they piece in. And I can also tell you some information about maybe there's a player you would want to fade. I haven't really dug too deep into it, but again, if you're seeing a player is just being slotted at the bottom of the order all the time or playing with kind of the B team, you probably don't want to kind of focus in on them and probably dial it back with kind of your optimism.
Right. Okay. Some good nuggets there already. Tyler Soderstrom getting catcher, reps at catcher. He's kind of like Ben Rice of the Yankees is also kind of in that, playing first base, but also getting reps at catcher. So kind of a similar, also both big, power hitters. So kind of a similar archetype of player that could gain eligibility. Gerard Encarnacion, keep an eye on him. Wilmer Flores, ain't it? I love him, but I think train has left the station there. So definitely recommend going to check out Thomas's spring training lineup tracker. Okay, so you mentioned the idea that pitchers probably there's more information to latch onto in terms of their spring training performance, and I think the market generally agrees because, like in some of these bigger leagues, like the high dollar main event leagues, you're seeing pitchers, especially ones that have had a nice spring and that have maybe some indicators that we like to see. They are flying up draft boards. Like people are taking them, 4 or 5 rounds ahead of where they were during the offseason. And one of those pitchers that I personally am like, I am trying not to get too sucked into the hype, but I can't help it. And that's Chris Sanchez of the Phillies. So I would love to get your thoughts on that, Thomas. Before I do, I haven't heard from Dave, so I wanted to get your thoughts on Sanchez. Is he's somebody that, based on what you've seen in spring so far, is he somebody that you are, you'd be like, I don't care where the price is, I'm willing to go there, or do you have some hesitation with him?
I do like him, and I like him a lot. I don't know what the highest price is that I would be in on him though. He did struggle a bit last year, but I do think a lot of it was just fatigue, because I think it was a big innings jump for him. But he's on a team that knows how to keep pitchers in the lineup. So I think any fears we have of him breaking down again, I think they can all just, go to the side right now. I know he's introduced a new pitch, which I'm sure we'll talk about here. And he was very excited about it, working on it in the offseason. And I do like him a lot. I think you could get away with him being your SP3 on a team for sure, with some upside as well. But yeah, no, I do like Sanchez a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. He looks awesome. I mean, we're talking about Chris Sanchez, left-hander for the Phillies, ground ball guy. We know he's in that 50 to 60% range in the past few years, but has really shown in spring increased strikeout ability, increased velocity, supporting that. So yeah, everything is looking good. Also has a new pitch. So Thomas, I know you've been posting player cards. He's been one of them. Give me your thoughts on Sanchez and how real do you think these changes are that he's made?
Sanchez has been a guy I've liked for quite a bit now. Last year, he kind of caught my eye once he started again throwing harder with that same command. So in 2022, 2023, kind of weren't the same. He had 1 year where he was throwing really hard, but he couldn't find the zone. And the next year, he could find the zone, but he just wasn't throwing hard, so he wasn't as effective. But then 2024 comes in, he kind of blended the two together. He just, again, had one of the best seasons of a pitcher in the NL. He had almost a 5 F WAR last year. But again, the strikeout rate wasn't super high, but it's reasonable to see he is an extreme ground ball pitcher. His sinker changeup combo is one of the best in baseball, and it just causes batters to just hit the ball straight into the ground. But what I'm seeing from him this spring is really encouraging. He's throwing 2 miles per hour harder across the board without really any other kind of degradation to his pitch mix. Honestly, his sinker and changeup have more horizontal break. He's throwing harder and they're moving more. So it's like these pitches look kind of leveled up. And then on top of that, he's added in that cutter. So last year, the slider wasn't too great of a pitch. He didn't throw it too much. But now he has that cutter, which could act more as a platoon neutral offering, could throw it more towards right-handed hitters. Again, either-handedness too. So I really like the introduction of that cutter. It seems like he's only thrown about 10 so far this spring. But again, it just adds another dimension to his already kind of crazy sinker changeup combo. It's grades out super well in my TJ Stuff Plus model. And last year, just kind of he showed off. Basically, I wouldn't like it looked like his ceiling last year, but again, if it is hold, I think he can probably take it another step higher, especially seeing that striker rate increase with the gains in velocity he's made.
Okay, yeah, and just looking at your TJ Stuff model, he's at a 109. So I'm assuming 100 is kind of is that considered average, or what is that scale based on?
Yeah, so 100 is average.
Mhm.
It's based on the per pitch scale. So 100 is average, and 100, and I guess every time you go up 10, that's one standard deviation above the mean. Once you start to aggregate the pitches, it gets a bit tighter, the distribution. So I also added in like a grade metric. In Christopher Sanchez's case, his sinker is a 77 grade on the 20 to 80 scale, which essentially means it's an 80 grade sinker. It is one
Wow.
of the best sinkers in baseball. The results last year kind of show it. He's really good at inducing ground balls. And then his changeup, 70 grade, I have it for. So again, those pitches working in tandem, he can just shut down essentially any batter. He's really good against righties because of that changeup, and he just jams lefties with the sinker. So adding that extra cutter to the mix to play off that slider, I just think again that just adds just another dimension to his game. And I drafted him in my league. I'm only in one fantasy league with my a bunch of buddies I've had for the past 10 years, and I made sure to get Chris Sanchez when
Okay.
he came to me. So I'm pretty confident that's my kind of stamp of approval there.
Yeah, if that's your one league and you said you were going to go get him, that definitely means something to me, and it should to you for those of you listening. And yeah, I think like Christopher Sanchez is probably, I'm just trying to pull up his ADP on other platforms. On NFBC in the main event, which just started this past week, he was at a ADP of 124. And I imagine, so pulling him up here for Yahoo, he's at 175, ESPN 178. So I think if, let's say you're drafting a 12-team league this weekend, you probably could get Christopher Sanchez at a pretty reasonable price. It's not an apples to apples comparison between, say, a 12-team Yahoo and a 15-team NFBC, but I think the point is that a lot of people really like him that have a lot of money on the line. So I think he's a guy definitely target in your drafts that are coming up here. Let's talk about another pitcher who actually I see is higher on your TJ Stuff model than Christopher Sanchez. And one thing that really stood out to me about this pitcher is that you have a nice feature on your leaderboard too, that you kind of you show how much a pitcher's stuff for each individual pitch has gone up or down compared to last year. And this pitcher, it looks like he's up across the board, and the results have backed that up. And that is Cincinnati Reds right-hander Hunter Green, who's looked awesome this spring. He's rocking a 114 TJ Stuff Plus, a 31% K minus walk percentage. I mean, dude's been elite. I had some concerns about him because he had the injury towards the end of last year. He did end up coming back for a start or two, but I just felt a little bit uneasy about that and how hard he throws. But man, he is kind of, I'm changing my stance on him based on what I've seen so far. So let me pass it to you, Thomas. What do you think about Hunter Green and some of the changes that he's made?
Yeah, Hunter Green stands out to me because I didn't think he could throw harder, or at
Mhm.
least keep it up during a start. But he is throwing about a mile and a half harder than he did last year, which is kind of crazy to hear from a guy that already throws so hard. So again, he's seen a nice substantial raise of velocity across the board. He's also kind of impacted his pitch grades. So again, Hunter Green striking out a bunch of guys, and he's looking like a more complete pitcher. Last year, again, he was really good. Unfortunately, he had that injury that kind of stalled his season. But this year, at least this spring, he's throwing that splitter a bit more. Again, the splitter isn't a super great pitch. It's not strike whiffing too many guys. It returned kind of average results last year, but in my mind, when I see Hunter Green's fastball and his slider, he doesn't really need a third pitch. The thing he needs, or at least a good third pitch, the thing he needs is a pitch that is good enough just
Mhm.
to keep batters on their toes. Because again, he can just keep pounding forward fastballs and sliders by you. But if he has the splitter in his back pocket, you have to be cautious of it. And it's good enough so that if he brings it out, he's going to make you look foolish. And I do like Hunter Green this year. Last year, again, I think definitely his metrics were a bit inflated by his really low BABIP. but also he plays in Great American Ballpark. I do like it this season. I think I ranked him around 21 in my top 50 pitchers for the year. So again, electric arsenal, looks more comfortable on the mound. Throwing a bunch of strikes this spring, and that splitter is definitely a pitch to watch, because I think that's kind of giving him that key to maintaining his fantastic results from last season.
All right, very good. So we have, I'm looking at, again, main event ADP. We've got two Hunters going back to back, Hunter Brown and then Hunter Green. Dave, which one of those would you take?
I would take Hunter Brown just simply because I am worried about the injury. I'm just worried. I know he's throwing faster now, but I just worry that over time, over and over and over, just keep on throwing. What's going to happen to that arm? I like that he's throwing the splitter, and maybe that'll mean fewer fastballs thrown, but he's throwing close to 100 miles. So I think there's going to be an injury down the road here. So I would take Hunter Brown simply for the fact that I think he'll be healthy for longer.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you put any stock into that, Thomas, based on, I mean, you follow pitchers very closely, and I know especially within the past year, there's been a lot of discussion. I know someone posted a board of all the hardest throwers, right? And how they were all getting hurt last year. So it's kind of become a thing in the fantasy community, is like looking out for these, 99 mile per hour plus guys. Do you put as much stock into that? Like, are you similarly worried about a guy like Hunter Green getting injured?
Yeah, when it comes to pitching, I think injuries are just inevitable, even if you're throwing 94, 95. But again, throwing 99 consistently is, again, no human is supposed to do that. So again, there is some caution there with Hunter Green, especially since he's struggled with injuries throughout his career. So I would say there is, again, some caution, some word of caution there. But again, he has that upside that maybe it warrants being selected ahead of Hunter Brown. Because again, who knows? Hunter Brown also doesn't throw as hard, but he throws fairly hard and throws a lot of innings. So it's just, I guess, playing risk versus reward here. I think you can just assume every pitcher is kind of a ticking time bomb and work for that. Again, I don't really like how common injuries are nowadays. Tommy John surgeries happen all the time. Even just shoulder injuries. Again, it's not fun to hear when these pitchers get injured, and I like to kind of sit more on the optimistic side and hope they all have a great season and they're all healthy. But again, that's tough to consider when you're, again, playing fantasy. You have kind of stakes on the line here. But as more of a analyst, I'm just hoping they're going to stay healthy and kind of show us what they've got, because again, some of these names we're talking about are really exciting.
Yeah, that's another thing I go back and forth on, is like, for example, I was trying to plan out an upcoming draft, and I was like, I'll be at a point I'm picking where Garrett Crochet's ADP is, and I'm like, do I want Crochet? But is he throwing too hard? Do I care? Like, is everybody just going to get hurt, and should I just not even consider that? I don't know. I still don't. I have no idea what the right answer is. I mean, George Kirby, if you asked any fantasy player who is the safest starting pitcher on the board right now, I would say the majority of people would say maybe Zach Wheeler, but George Kirby would be right up there, right? And what do you know? He went on the IL with a shoulder injury. So it's like, we just don't, I don't know. Maybe in this moment, because I think you spoke last time, I'm thinking, well, they're all taking time bombs, right? Like, I don't know, man. Dave, it's I don't know how you do the
Kirby
injury
twice.
Huh?
I have Kirby on 2 teams. I drafted him twice, so I'm with you on that. So you just don't know. Like,
You just don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do one more pitcher, and I think you posted about him today, Thomas. That's Jack Leiter, Texas Rangers starting pitcher. It's looking like he might get a pretty clear path to a rotation spot now that Cody Bradford's on the IL, Tyler Molly's on the IL, Kumar Rocker hasn't pitched well, so I don't really see a scenario where Leiter isn't in the rotation. Tell us why or why not to be excited about Leiter this coming year, Thomas.
Yeah, so Jack Leiter, second overall pick a few years back, always kind of had the hype around him. They threw him into Double A, kind of unprecedented for a recent draftee, especially a pitcher, to be given such a high placement in the minors from the get go. But this spring, Jack Leiter has really impressed me. He's striking out all guys, throwing more strikes than he was last year, at least looking like he's doing it, except for his start. His last start, he walked 5 guys, but he also struck out 5 guys. So again, he has that balance there. He's not allowing a lot of hard contact. But the big thing with Leiter is he's throwing effectively 2 new pitches. He has that new sinker, which will definitely be very helpful against those right-handed hitters. He's kind of struggled against them throughout his career, so now hopefully a pitch for the inner third. So he will jam them, hopefully, and do some weak contact. And then he has this changeup. So again, the kick changeup has always been, I guess, if you ever heard about it, it's been everywhere this spring. Every pitcher's throwing a kick changeup. It's just a fancy term for a changeup that a supernator can throw. So those pitchers that have those kind of big, sweeping, fast sliders, those sweeping breaking balls, but they can't really rotate their arm inwards, like pronate. You're watching me on the video, you can pronate and rotate like that. So the way they kind of kick the ball with a spike grip, so it gets a lot of drop compared to just a regular changeup, and they're also able to maintain a very high velocity. So in Leiter's case, his changeup is showing incredible amount of drop compared to last season, while also being 3 miles an hour harder. So again, now he's getting that separation from his fastball and his changeup. So it really does look like a great pitch. And according to my model, he has 5 above average pitches now. He got rid of the cutter. His cutter was one of his least effective pitches last year. I'm glad they made that change. And now he has that brand new sinker, that revamped changeup, and he always had a really good fastball and slider combo. So again, diversifying that pitch mix. He is one of my favorite options this spring. You probably will get it for cheap in one of your leagues. And now he has a clear path to playing time. It was he looked to probably be the 7th guy, but now with again Bradford hurt, Molly still questions about what he's doing. And Rocker he's not looked really great this spring. Again, still a prospect. I don't want to write him off too much. But Leiter, again, you probably have nightmares, flashbacks from last year. Once he got called up, he's got shelled. But he looks like a new pitcher. And again, he's throwing harder. Everything just looks better across the board. But to me, and the metrics kind of back it up, and he's striking out guys at will.
Yep. He is he's looking great. Want to get those walks under control. Like, I got all excited when I saw his line for the first few innings, and then I saw the final line of his last spring training performance, and he had those 5 walks, and like, that's been his issue, right? But he's going to give you, I think, really good strikeout numbers. And yeah, I mean, he's on a good team. I think going back to this idea of like, what do you do with this information? I think when you have a guy like Leiter, who, wasn't even, I think in draft champion season, he was around pick 500. And now he's gradually moving up. I really like a guy like that. He's not going to go, like, we're not taking Jack Leiter, I don't think, in like round 10, like we're not, I don't think there's any scenario where we're investing like a super premium pick on him. I think for a guy like that, you just go get him, right? Like, let's say, I don't know, in a main event or like a 15-team league, I think you go into like the 200s, because at that point, like any pitchers who are available, there's a lot of risk, right? You're dealing with pitchers with warts. And I think a guy like that has shown something tangible in the spring, shown some changes, and that has a lot of upside, I think it's a guy you just push up, and it's like, you know what, just go get him. If you like him, you believe in what he's doing, just go get him. And another guy that we had on the list here, I feel very similar about, is Casey Mize. A pitcher who, he was a former number 1, I think he was the number 1 overall pick, actually, former top prospect. I think we're seeing him finally make the changes for him to take that next step, actually be a strikeout pitcher. And another guy who's on a competitive team, he's in a good home park. I really think a guy like Casey Mize is someone that you chase up the board. And, if you're going into the 200s to get him, fine. Like, just go get your guy. That's kind of the way I see it. I don't know about you, Dave. What do you think about chasing a guy like Mize up the board?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm gonna chase one of these two guys, I think I would actually choose Jack Leiter over Mize. But
Yeah.
I see what you mean though with both. Like they both changed, what they're doing, and they're really impressing this spring. But I do like Leiter a bit more, just because he worked hard. It looked like in the off season. I think he went to Driveline or one of those
Okay.
places to just change who he is, trying new things, and he's a completely different pitcher right now. And I wonder if like this new kick change is going to be kind of like what the sweeper was a couple years ago, and it just took over the league until people were figuring it out. So with that in mind, maybe Leiter is at least a half season's worth of, one of those guys that come out as league winning picks.
Hmm.
So I do agree with you, though. You got to go get your guys, especially later in drafts. Just go get them.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't work out, it's a short leash. You find someone else who it's working for.
Right. Especially if you're in like a 12 team, a 12 teamer, maybe whatever platform it is. You use one of your last few picks. Those are guys you're probably going to be churning off your roster anyway. So instead of taking Michael Waka, like a guy like that who you kind of know who he is, just take the shot, right? And I mean, you might land. There's a potential where we're taking. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but would it be crazy if we're taking Jack Leiter in the top 100 picks next year? I don't think so. I mean, the guy's again former top prospect, tons of strikeouts. Like he's like right there, right, one tweak away, and he could be a top pitcher in this league. So, yeah, absolutely, go get your guys. Now, we've been very positive, right? We've talked about a lot of these pitchers that have shown us something, shown positive changes in spring. I want to, and you're always very positive, Thomas. Like you're always like pointing out the great things these guys are doing. I want you to go a little negative. I want to hear about maybe some guys who you've seen their spring training data, and you're like, this doesn't look great. Like this is a little bit concerning.
Yeah. I typically try and lean more on that positive, optimistic side. I feel like fans also kind of like that too. I don't want to be too negative. Yeah, I like highlighting the kind of the positives and the good things about pitchers. But one pitcher that really, really, really caught my eye, I did not like what I saw, at least in the lone Statcast game we had. It was Shota Amanaga. Uh, I He just did not look good. Velocity was way down, averaging 89 miles an hour his fastball, with also somehow reduced ride on the pitch, so less induced vertical break. It tanked in my model, so all his pitches are now under 100, which is not what you want to see. Last year, that fastball and the splitter were phenomenal. Those are the reasons why he returned such a fantastic rookie year. But now, if he's throwing under 90 miles an hour with the depressed shape, it does not look good. He didn't do too well in that one start, at least in that case, I have him, and I don't know what to make of it. Hopefully, that velocity kind of climbs back up, but seeing about 3 miles an hour down the first, from his first, and he maxed out at 90 and a half, which
Yikes.
you really do not want to see that. He's barely scraping by there with his fastball. The splitter still looks all right. But again, playing in Chicago, Windy City, with his crazy high fly ball rates, probably won't be doing too well if that fastball continues to struggle as it already has. Another pitcher that kind of stood out a bit was Tanner Bybee. Velocity's a bit down, shape's a bit depressed as well. So his fastball wasn't looking too great, but maybe I'll give him. It wasn't 3 miles an hour down. It was just about a mile down, and the shape's a bit different. He also follows me, so I'll be a bit more optimistic about Tanner Bybee. But again, when I'm looking at these pitchers having kind of ones I'm pessimistic about, I'm looking at typically their fastball. If they're not able to at least be sitting relatively close to what they were last year, it's a bit concerning. And the last one name, I guess this is more of a sleeper closer potential if Robert Suarez is going to get traded, is Jason Adam. I'm not sure what he's doing, if he's testing something out, but he does not look good at all this spring. Again, 2 miles an hour down, stuff's just depressed across the board. My fastball, it went down from what number is that? Like 100 and like 110 essentially, all the way down to 95. That's like what it is. Like the fastball does not look good. Hopefully it's just him tinkering with stuff, but he's had a handful of starts and the data just kind of doesn't look too great. But again, Jason Adam, you're probably not targeting him at least too highly in your leagues, I hope, just because it's kind of crowded in San Diego. But again, Amanaga, Bybee, Jason Adam, their data kind of looks pretty concerning. Bybee the least concerning of the bunch, but definitely things you do not want to see. At least, because it's not just the start of spring anymore. We're like first games in about a week.
Right.
I think less than a week actually. We have the Dodgers game. So Monica, that's definitely. I think he's starting opening.
Yeah,
day,
he's going to be starting out there against the Dodgers. Yeah.
Yeah, so he definitely maybe he has one more spring start. No, I think they're already in Japan. Or I think
Yeah, they're probably flying out. Like in,
yeah, they're already flying out. So that the start we have in Monaga was not encouraging, and I don't know really what to make of it because again he was so good last season, but he did let up 2 home runs in that one start, one spring start against Cleveland. So he's just he's a guy I'm very worried about.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. Those are important names. I mean, Monaga and Bybee are 6th-round picks right now, going around pick actually back to back in main event ADP at 83 and 84. So yeah, definitely guys you're spending quite a bit on. And yeah, I've heard actually even Nick Pollock has mentioned on his Pitch Plus podcast, which you absolutely should be listening to every day. He's been expressing some concern about Amanaga, so and definitely bench him. Do not, based on what we've seen and the fact that he's going to be facing the Dodgers, I would not want to roll Amanaga out there for that first start and have him just torch my ratios. So if you've already taken that plunge, be very cautious. And as far as the Padres situation, we don't like Robert Suarez right now. Like a lot of people are fading him. Adam's stuff is down, so maybe it's Jeremiah Estrada. Finally gets to kind of, we always knew that he had big stuff, so maybe he gets a shot at closing based on the other options not being so great. All right, we have to take a quick break, and we will be right back to talk more fantasy baseball. All right, we are back. So we're gonna go quickly through this just for time's sake, but I did want to ask because something when looking at your leaderboard that kind of I just don't quite like this metric. I just don't quite understand it, and that's actually 2 of them: IVB, which is induced vertical break, and extension. So I wanted to ask you about that, Thomas, to get your thoughts and just how we as fantasy players should be looking at that metric. Like what does it tell us, and what is a number that we should be looking at for a pitcher when we're evaluating them?
Yeah, so IVB, that stands for induced vertical break. So think of it as the vertical movement of the pitch due to spin. So don't even consider gravity. So if you think of a bullet or a football, it's spinning on its spiral, so it would have no induced vertical break. So if you impart backspin on that ball or whatever, it'll rise. Kind of if you're looking at say a beach ball. If you kind of rip the top of a beach ball down, it'll rise up. If you ever done that. And if you apply topspin to the ball, it'll drop. So that's for a curveball. So that's why when you see these plots, you'll see fastballs, which have backspin. That's how you generate that movement on them. Move up on the plot, while you'll see a pitch, say a curveball, move down on the plot. So that's when we're talking about induced vertical break. So essentially, how much this pitch moved due to the spin compared to, say, if the spin had no impact at all, just gravity on it. And the other metric, extension, that's how far down the pitcher gets towards the plate when they're releasing the ball. So for extension, league average is around 6.5 feet. We'll see elite, I would call 7. We see some pitchers that are crazy high extension. Logan Gilbert, Alexis Diaz, Joey Cantillo, they're at 7.5 feet of extension. That is nuts. I got to the point where their extension was so high, it kind of forced me to adjust my model a bit because it could not, it had no clue how to deal with it. Then we also see some pitchers with very low extension. Luis Castillo is one of them. When you see him pitch, he just looks like he's taking a nice step off the mound. He's not looking like he's pitching. He's just walking forward and then releasing the ball. But the reason why extensions is important, at least holistically, if you because again it depends on how a pitcher's delivery works. Again, Luis Castillo has that sidearm delivery, that very low slot. But when you have a pitcher, say Spencer Strider, who easily gets 7 feet of induced vertical break, it helps his fastball play up because he's getting closer to the plate. And so his already high 90s velocity is perceived to be faster from the batter. They also have less time to react. So that's why extension is important. So looking at pitchers with higher extension, it'll help essentially all their pitchers play up, but it's very important for their fastballs because again, it makes their like already mid 90s, high 90s pitch look even faster. That's why going back, blast of the past, Carter Capps had that illegal delivery. He kind of like jumped off the mound. He got over 8 feet of extension. They banned it because again, it was kind of nuts. It looked illegal, and they eventually banned it. But he was one of the best relief pitchers in baseball. So again, getting that length down the mound just gives the batter less time to react. So in general, higher extension is, I would say, more beneficial. But again, it depends on the pitcher at hand, the way they release the ball and everything. All comes down to that. And when we're looking at induced vertical break, there isn't really one big number, I would say. It's important to look at, especially for fastballs, four-seam fastballs, is the interaction and the relationship between induced vertical break and release height. Because we see pitchers like Nick Pivetta and Justin Verlander, they can get 20, 21 inches of induced vertical break, but they're also releasing the ball from very high, like 7 feet up in the air. And typically when you're releasing the ball that high, you can kind of rip the ball. You can rip the ball, I guess, from the top a bit more since your arm is actually straight up. So it's a bit easier to get that induced vertical break. But when we see someone like Brian Wu, who only has about 14, 15 inches of induced vertical break, we look at it and be like, maybe that looks below average. But when you consider his release height is around 5 feet, that interaction, he's able to get in, I guess, above average, even near elite induced vertical break for his release point. So yeah, it's not one size fits all. It just helps kind of piece together the puzzle. And another thing I like to look at, especially looking at something like a changeup or an off-speed pitch, is how it plays off the fastball. I guess a good example, we're talking about Casey Mize. He's getting a lot more depth on his splitter this year. So compared to his fastball to a splitter, it's around, I think, 15 inches now. Last year, it was closer to about 8. So now when he's throwing his fastball in a splitter, they look similar out of hand. But now when they're getting to the plate, again, they are a bit slower, about 6-7 mile an hour difference. Now, the fastball is like an arrow. It's just going straight, like riding high, and batters will swing under it. But the splitter just dies. It just drops under it. So batters just are kind of flustered by it just because of that big separation between the pitches. That's what I like to look at. And I consider that in my model, that is an input, the difference in the movement between your fastball and your secondaries. And I think that's an important aspect, especially when looking at an off-speed pitch.
Mm-hmm. Is that something unique to your model, to your knowledge, or is that something that's kind of incorporated into all of these different publicly available ones?
I think for the most part, they all have some type of kind of interaction between the primary pitch and kind of all the other pitches. I know, Sarah's Max Bay, their Stuff Plus model on Fangraphs, they did consider the movement compared to like the fastball compared to the rest of their arsenal movement. But now with their latest update, it's just velocity they're looking at. So that difference in velocity, they're not really looking at like say if their fastball and changeup has say 10 inches of vertical separation. It's just looking at, they have 10 mile an hour difference. That's all we're going to consider when comparing it to one another, which I think is another approach. It's just a different approach to look at it. And again, different models. It's always nice to see how other people operate and think, and we can compare the models to one another and see where they agree or where they disagree. And we can just learn a lot from them.
Yeah. Awesome stuff, man. Yeah, I mean that is way above my level of understanding, but
Fascinating.
I think it's just really cool, and I think there is something. I think there's debate as to how much we can use like stuff models in terms of evaluating, like for fantasy, and I mean I think it's just another piece of the puzzle, man. And I think it's something to incorporate into your process and at least consider because I do think there's definitely some signal there. All right. We are going to go back to talking about some players here. And I remember when this article came out last month, and I was just like nodding my head in agreement at some of these names you mentioned in it. But on your Substack, you had a list of your breakouts, and you gave one breakout per team. It was really well done. Obviously, it was you backed up your claims for why this player was going to break out. So what I'd like to do now, we're about a month after this article is written. That was written before spring training. So I picked out a couple names here that I want to, and we don't have to go into depth, but just want to know if based on what you've seen, I mean, you've been following this stuff so closely. So want to know if your opinion of these players has changed at all. So all all you have to, or I'm going to ask you for is if you could tell us if your opinion um, is higher, lower, or no change at all. You feel the same way as you did about them before. So the first name is someone that is near and dear to Dave's heart. I know you get all worked up when I even say his name, so I need you to stay in your seat over there, Dave. And that is Jonathan Aranda, first
Oof.
baseman for the Tampa Bay Rays. A kind of utility guy, can play different positions. But where are you at on Aranda, and what have what are your thoughts based on his performance and maybe how the Rays have been using him?
Yeah, so for Aranda, I listed him as kind of the breakout candidate. I think he has great underlying tools last year, and then this year had kind of more of an opportunity to kind of be part of that Rays lineup. And this spring, it seems like he's batting mainly against. He actually has 10 starts, and there 9 of them are against right-handed pitchers, which was kind of expected. So
Mhm.
overall, I'd say I'm a bit neutral on Aranda. He hasn't had the greatest results this spring, but I do like kind of their usage of him. He has starts at first base, handful starts at second base, and he's playing up in the order. The lowest he's batted is fifth, and it looks like he's going to be kind of that main guy. He's first baseman against against right-handed pitchers, so he'll have a lot of playing time this year.
I love it.
I
I
know,
love it.
Dave. Yeah, I mean the park shift to Steinbrenner Field. I think it's wheels up for
Yeah,
Aranda.
absolutely.
So I'm with you, bud. Especially given his price. Let's talk about a new New York Met, former Yankee, Clay Holmes. I think I know the answer to this, but I'll just ask you here, Thomas. What do you think about Holmes? Has your belief in him gone up because of what he's done so far?
Yes, I don't think it could go any higher, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
He Holmes has kind of just impressed everybody this spring. He's added essentially 3 new pitches: his fastball, his cutter, and I don't know how I'm forgetting the other one. The sweeper? No, no, he always
Yeah,
had a
he has a
sweeper.
sweeper. Yep.
Fastball, cutter, and changeup. Oh, what am I talking
Big
about? The
change.
changeup is the big thing, the kick change. Yeah,
Oh,
I
that's
can't
right.
believe I
Yeah.
forgot
Yep.
that. Yeah,
Mhm.
the forcing fastball, the cutter, and the changeup. The changeup is definitely the most important piece of the puzzle. I'm thinking he had one, I guess, once he was starting with Pittsburgh, but that's kind of fully revamped now. He's getting a lot of drop on it. The sinker is still phenomenal. The sweeper and slider have always been good. I just the Mets. It seems like they have a pretty good foundation and pitching development team there, and kind of get the best out of their pitchers. We saw last year, Manaya, Severino, and now Clay Holmes. Hopefully, kind of joining that group there of success stories out of New York. And I can't. I don't think I can be higher than him. And he's gonna need to be good because the Mets rotation has kind of been decimated already. So um, everything's looking really good with Holmes. Hopefully the health stays up, but it doesn't seem like he's like overthrowing. It just seems everything looks to be in check with Holmes, and I'm a lot higher than him. I'm pretty glad that I at least put him on this list a month ago, and it seems at least everything's trending in the right direction for Holmes.
Yeah, that is looking like a great call. He's in that Christopher Sanchez, like him and Sanchez, it feels like are the biggest movers over the past week here. I mean, he's just flying up draft boards. It's Clay Holmes. So good call there. You made a good call last time we had you on the show. You told us a year ago, and this was like well before he debuted. You said keep an eye out for David Festa of the Twins. And he came up, and I mean, it wasn't perfect, but I think he showed that ability that, that you had seen in the minors. David Festa, tell me about his spring. From what I've seen, it's kind of mixed, but tell me if what your opinion is based on what he's done so far.
Yeah, so with David Festa, the reason why he caught my eye last year was again that his three pitch mix, like changeup, the fastball, the slider, all graded out well in my model. And he's again throughout his whole minor league career has just been able to strike guys out. With again, not the best walk rates, but they were serviceable. And last season, I was really excited once he got the call in July. Actually, I think it was June. It was on my birthday. I think he was starting, or a few days after. I was definitely at Disneyland with my girlfriend
Oh
when he
wow,
did his,
you
when
and
he
him are just
debuted.
linked, man.
When he debuted, I was like, "This has got to be it." And then he got lit up. I was like, "Okay, this is a one off."
Mhm.
And then he got lit up again. I'm like, "Okay, he's got to work on something." He got sent down, and then once he got called back up in the second half, lights out down the stretch. He
Right.
was arguably the best Twins' second best pitcher after Pablo Lopez, and again, he's showing pretty solid stuff this spring. His velocity is up slightly, about a tick on his fastball. Stuff looks pretty good, and now he introduced a new sinker, and the sinker grades out really well. And again, he has that ability to just throw very hard, and it'll just help his sinker play up. It deviates a bit from his fastball, so it gives him another option against right-handed batters. He already has that really good slider to face them, so I do like the development there. The big question with Festa now is the usage, because it seems like there's a big jam with the Twins. I thought Festa was going to be the number 5 guy from the get go, but it seems like Paddock is probably going to slot in at number 4, and then it's just like a race between Matthews, Woods, Richardson, and Festa now, and I don't know who's going to win. Maybe Simeon Woods Richardson. He has kind of that seniority. I'm not sure about his options available, but I don't think they want to use him out of the bullpen. So Festa, I do like him this season. I think his spring has been, despite against not the greatest line, but I think it's been encouraging, especially with that new sinker. It's definitely one of the more impressive new pitches I've seen. And again, similar to, as we mentioned before, just gives him another kind of dimension, and it helps him again limit the home runs that kind of plagued him last season.
Right. All right. So we are going to leave it there in terms of baseball talk. We're going to transition to our final segment. And if you're listening for the first time, this is where we move away from baseball stuff and talk about things that we personally are doing to maintain our overall wellness. And we always start with our guest. This could be something physically, mentally, just something that we're due to kind of keep our mental health in a good place. So let's start with you, Thomas. What's something that you're doing recently?
Yeah. So again, I've been kind of drowning in baseball data these past few weeks. So this week I decided, you know what? I'll take a break and I'll watch some TV. Again, I wouldn't recommend this if you wanted to kind of relax. It's the show Severance.
Okay.
I finally caught all up. It's really great. It's a great show. I would recommend it. It's just not really the show you want to kind of calm down to. It's very intense.
Right.
Very intense. It's very
Yeah.
intense. But I caught up. I finally caught up. So next week there's the finale. I'm gonna go hang out, watch it with some friends. So I'm excited for that. And I think I should until the regular season starts. I think I'm just gonna probably take a little step back from baseball a bit and hang out, and especially with the weather getting nicer, daylight savings time, I don't have to just see the sun down at 5 p.m. now. It's
Right.
staying up much longer, so that's definitely been a brighter aspect, I guess, in two ways for me this past week or so.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think, Dave, you had spoken about something similar in the segment last week, like just finding other non-baseball stuff and kind of
Yeah.
like we're so deep into this, and it's going to ramp up even more once the season starts. So trying to find a better balance, and making sure that you're looking into, exploring other interests because I think anything, whether it's baseball, no matter what it is, work, whatever, I think if it's your interest become too narrow, you kind of get yourself into trouble. So I think that's wise advice. Dave, what about you, man?
I'm borrowing from, I think it was you when you said you're going to do some spring cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
It was you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I did that this week. Like I said, I had the week off, but every day I just picked a room and I just got rid of stuff.
Awesome.
The hoarding that was done in this house, my God, the stuff that we had. So yeah, it was just one room a day and just deep clean, get rid of stuff that I don't even need, and it feels good. Like it
Feels
feels good to
freaking
walk in the
good, right?
house. Pardon?
It feels freaking good, man. Like
It
it's just like
does.
you're free. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's always on the back of your mind, and then when you see it clean and it's how you've always envisioned it, it's great. So,
Yep.
yeah, cleaning as mental health. Who would have thought? But it
There's something
works.
to that.
It
Yep.
works.
Absolutely. Good stuff. All right, for me, for what I really want to focus on, and this is what I want to do to like really hold myself accountable. Um, I'm trying to not be on my phone as much. And I know that's going to be particularly challenging with baseball season coming up. I mean, I know a lot of us, especially if we're playing in a ton of fantasy leagues, like we're looking at the box scores every night, right? And we're like really like we're so deep into that. And it becomes like a compulsive thing. Like if I have a free second, it's like, oh, I gotta grab the phone and see, who's doing what. And it becomes a problem, So I want to call myself out on that here. And listen, Dave, like if we do this segment in a couple weeks, feel free to be like right on the show, be like, yo, how's your phone use?
Yeah,
Are you keeping that in check? Like just as a way, because then I gotta come clean, right? Um, and I'll tell you, like, all right, this is how many hours I've been on, just as a way, because I need that accountability because I know a lot of us struggle with that. Freaking Twitter, X, all these things, man, they're so engaging. They have trained us, right? They've got us hooked to this stuff. So, yeah, I definitely need to work on that. I notice when I do take breaks, and they're not long breaks, but even when they're short breaks, I feel like calmer. It's
mm,
just like that constant stimulation is just not. It's not healthy. It becomes like a drug. Like you're just getting that dopamine hit, right?
yeah.
And I really want to work on that. So that is, and I encourage anybody, like anybody who's listening, and I imagine there are probably a lot of people out there who can relate. DM we'll even start an accountability group. Like I'm thinking something crazy. Like if this is something you want to work on yourself, DM us and whatever. We'll chat about it as a way to kind of like support each other in that. So yeah, that's my mental health minute. I know that working on that will definitely help mine. So
It hits you too when you get that weekly summary, right? And it says the
oh yeah,
average,
man.
it went
Yeah.
up, and it's
Yeah, it's embarrassing. It really is. Like I look at that, I'm like, oh my God. Like I sit here and complain, oh, I can't do this or I can't. No, I could. I could do that. It's just if I took that time that I was on my phone and put it towards this thing, yeah, I could do that. So enough. Enough with the BS.
all right.
So all right. We will leave it there. Thomas, thank you again so much for joining us. This was great. I think a lot of really good, insightful information that you shared with us today. Again, if you just want to tell us quickly where we could find your work, how we could sign up for your Substack, Patreon, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. Again, Thomas Nestico, TJ Stats. You can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky. I have a Patreon and a Substack. The Patreon's more for, I guess, supporting me as a creator, creating my apps. Again, that generates all my graphics. So you can do the same. The daily pitching summaries, the season-long pitching summaries, and it helps me just, again, create more cool things. I even release some stuff for free. So check it out on my Patreon. You can also support me on Substack. I'm writing articles. I hope to have an update to my top 50 pitching prospects. Hopefully in April, maybe May. I did release those a few months back. There has been too much traction. Maybe I want to bring Jack Leiter all the way to the top, but I'm going to hold off for that for now. But yeah, again, it was great. Great having me on the show tonight, and I had a great time.
Awesome. All right. Stay tuned. We will be back next week. We've got, I'm drawing a blank, Jeff Fletcher. We've got Jeff Fletcher of the Orange County Register on. We'll be talking Los Angeles Angels. So we've had him on a few times, and he's always great. So really looking forward to that. So if you like the show, please rate and review. Give us some feedback. We would absolutely love that. But until next time, for Dave Funnel, for Mike Carter, I'm Chris Torres. Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Baseball Beat.